Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to this installment of Open Mic, the show where the mic is open, the floor, as they would say, is yours. What do you guys want to talk about? That is what we are here to discuss. I am, of course, your host, John Campea. Good to have you guys here. There wasn't a John Campea show earlier today. We had some technical issues. Wasn't Spectrum this time. I know a lot of people suspected it was Spectrum. Was not Spectrum. Everything's all tidied away, though. We'll be right back on it again tomorrow, so sorry about that. But anyway, thought we would do an open mic tonight to talk about some stuff and see how you guys are doing. Good to have all you guys here. And, you know, just to let you know, on open mic, because some people might be suspecting they're going to see questions sent in on the tip link, but that is not how you send in questions for open mic. Now, for the John Campea show, you do use the tip link, and we'll put that on the show and you know where to send in. But here on open mic, if you want to have a question or comment address, just go ahead and use the super chat feature and send that in. Now, I expect a lot of people are going to be busy tonight, you know, watching things like the election, but I thought there was also going to be a lot of people, those of us here who probably wanted to avoid any of that and just kind of have a little bit of a distraction from all that for tonight. So I thought that would be good for us to do. And that is what we are going to do and talk about some other stuff other than election stuff. So that's what we're here to do. And we're going to get things started. Now, before we get here to do the, to get your questions, just a little something I was going to talk about this morning that I thought I would talk about now, which is, and before I say it, you guys know what a wild Quentin Tarantino fan I am, right? You know I'm a wild Quentin Tarantino fan. Anyway, I'm a wild Quentin Tarantino fan, and the guy is a brilliant genius. Now, all the brilliant geniuses every once in a while say something really dumb. You do, I do, even the brilliant geniuses all do. And I think I just saw Quentin Tarantino say the dumbest thing I've ever heard him say. And that, no, I'm not talking about when he said that he thought Joker 2 was brilliant, because all film is subjective. I and a lot of you clearly disagree with him, but all film is subjective. That's cool. He liked it. That's great. Awesome. No problem with that. But it came as a result of a headline that I saw. And the headline that I saw said, you know, Quentin Tarantino refuses to watch Denis Villeneuve's Dune, which is like the best movie of the past 10 years. Because I didn't need to see that story again. It's one remake after another. Now, I wanted to go over what he said and why I think what he said was so dumb and borderline hypocritical. We'll get to that in a second. In talking about not wanting to see Dune, he said, I saw David Lynch's Dune a couple of times, so I don't need to see that story again. Tarantino said about his lack of interest in Villeneuve's adaptations. I don't need to see Spice Worms. I don't need to see a movie that says the word spice so dramatically. And it goes, it's one after another with the remakes Tarantino explained. People ask, have you seen Dune? Have you seen Ripley? Have you seen Shogun? And I'm like, no. There's 6, 7 Ripley books. If you do one again, why are you doing the same one that they've done twice already? I've seen that story twice before, and I don't really like either version, so I'm not really interested in seeing it a third time. That's fair, by the way. That statement, I think, is pretty fair. Anyway, if you did another story, what would it be interesting enough to give it a shot anyway? I saw Shogun in the 80s. I watched all 13 hours. So did I. I'm good. I don't need to see that story again. I don't care how they do it, he added. I don't care if they take me and put me in an ancient Japan in a time machine. I don't care. I've seen the story. All right. Now, on the surface, this might appear to just be another one of the dribbling, the too many remakes kind of comment. But it's a little, that's not what's ridiculous about this. Here's what I find ridiculous about it. Is the fact that Quentin Tarantino, who is a genius, by the way, seems to be equating that, you know, the basic story is everything there is to a movie. I would contend this. The reason why there are so many good scripts that get made into bad movies happens all the time. Really good scripts. Like, how many times you heard people say, man, I read this script for this horrible movie. I was surprised how good the script was. Why didn't the movie turn out good? The reason for that is because I believe a movie or any story is like 20 to 30% the bones of the story and 70 to 80% in the telling of the story. I believe 20 to 30% of the overall quality of a movie or a story of some kind is the bones of the story. But 70 to 80% of the quality of it or the enjoyment of it comes from how the story is told. That's why, again, you can have great scripts that get turned into bad movies, right? Movies are experiences. And I would contend to you that if you watch the 1970s animated version of Lord of the Rings, have you guys ever seen that one? Come on, some of you guys have to have seen that old animated one. The animated one is, I'm not going to say it's great, but it's got a near and dear place in my heart for that. So, but no one is going to watch the 1970s animated Lord of the Rings stuff or the animated Hobbit stuff and say, oh, it's just the same thing as watching the Peter Jackson movies. Yeah, they're based on the same thing, but would you not agree that watching that 1970s animated telling of Lord of the Rings and the Peter Jackson telling of the Lord of the Rings, would you not agree that those are two completely different experiences? Yeah, they're both based on Lord of the Rings. Yes. But they are totally different experiences. Completely different experiences. Even though they might be similar in that one thing. So when, you know, God bless him, the genius, Quentin Tarantino says, I've already seen the story. I don't need to see it again. Really? I've already seen the story. The 1980s, you know, mini series of Shogun. It'll just be the same as the new Shogun. Really? The old Dune movie? You think it's just, I don't need to see that story again. It's going to be the same thing. Really? Because, really? Huh. That's interesting. That's like if you've already got one telling of a story, if you've already got one version, why on earth would you want to watch another version? I don't know. I mean, Quentin's saying if you've already got one version of a story, why on earth would you want to then go and watch another telling of that story? I don't know. That's a crazy idea. That's nuts, right? Now, listen, some may point out, obviously being a little facetious here, got the Django. Now, you can truthfully and very correctly point out, hey, John, listen, for Django Unchained, yeah, a lot of it was based on that original Django movie, but Quentin Tarantino, being the genius that he is, and he is a genius, took it and kind of made his own spin on it and had a lot of original stuff. Oh, that's all true. But that just goes back to my point that the quality of the story in a movie is 20 to 30% of the bones and 70 to 80% of the telling of it. Because it's not just Inglourious Bastards, or I should say it's not just Django Unchained. I mean, everybody knows that Inglourious Bastards was heavily influenced by Dirty Dozen. Like Inglourious Bastards, I mean, honestly, he could have called Inglourious Bastards the Dirty Dozen, and it just would have, I mean, it would make sense, even though it very much had its own story to tell and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely. But I mean, the basic bones of Inglourious Bastards were just taken from the Dirty Dozen. I mean, why would you want to tell? Why would I want to go see something that's already been told? I don't know, Quentin. Maybe because just like you did, you took a story, but then you told it in your way, put your own spins on it, threw a little unique things in it that are unique from those originals. Make it a little bit different. But the basic thing here is, Quentin, you brilliantly, as if Quentin Tarantino's watching this, but you, Quentin, brilliantly took a story, but you told it in your way and you did your own things to it. That's why I think, because Quentin Tarantino is such a genius and he knows this because he clearly did it, I think it is the dumbest thing in the world for him to say, oh, why would I want to watch Dune if I've already seen a radically different telling of that story? Because if is there anybody here who saw that Dune, that original Dune, and then saw Denis Villeneuve's Dune and not say that they are radically different tellings of the story? They are radically different tellings of the story. Just like his Django, which is awesome, by the way. I think it's my favorite movie of his, Django Unchained. I think it's my favorite. That and Inglourious Basterds are both brilliant. Love them. But just like Quentin told a story that was his telling of it and made it a very different experience than what the other movie was. So I just find it, dare I say, a little hypocritical of, maybe not hypocritical. No, hypocritical is not the proper word to use here, but a little self-contradictory. I think that. I don't think it's hypocritical. I think it's self-contradictory for Quentin Tarantino to stand up here, and that's why I say it's the dumbest thing I think he's ever said, to say, why would I want to watch a movie if it's kind of the same story, when he has done it and done it brilliantly and is a great example of why it can be great and why it can be worthwhile and why it creates a completely different viewing experience. Somebody needs to tell Quentin Tarantino that Shogun that Hulu had is a very different viewing experience than the miniseries Shogun they did back in the 80s with Richard Chamberlain. Somebody needs to tell him that Dune, that Denis Villeneuve has done, is a radically different viewing experience than the Dune he's talking about. Just like Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings is a radically different viewing experience than those Lord of the Rings animations that we had in the 1970s. And so for him to say, well, why? Listen, he's a genius. He understands that 70 to 80% of movie making is about the telling of the story. It's how you tell it. That's why you have some remakes that are horrible to original films that are brilliant. Same story, right? But they're told differently, and so one ends up being fabulous and one ends up being garbage. They're not the same thing. They're very, very different. One was great, one was terrible. So, yeah, I just think, and I say this with all due, like I said, I say this with all due respect to Quentin Tarantino, because I love him. Like I said, I love Django. I love Inglourious Basterds. I don't bring these up to kind of discredit Quentin Tarantino, but rather to say that Quentin Tarantino's genius creations just kind of prove the point that what he just said was pretty stupid. Just like you say stupid things, just like I say stupid, we all do it, but I think this was kind of the peak of Quentin Tarantino saying something dumb, because again, it flies right in the face of what he himself as a filmmaker has done. Anyway, that's just kind of my take on it. If you guys have a perspective on it or whatever, feel free to jump into the comments and let me know what you guys think. All right, guys, listen, we are going to now do what we are really here to do, which is to sit down and take your comments and questions. You have a thought, theory, opinion, or question you'd like me to address, as long as I deem it appropriate to address, go ahead and use the super chat feature. And if you're watching this later on, you can only do this if you're watching the show while we're live. But go ahead and send on in a question and we will get to it. But before we do, we're going to take a second here and thank one of the sponsors of tonight's episode of Open Mic, the good folks over at Tile Trackers. Guys, we want to take a second to thank a sponsor of today's video, Life 360 Tile Trackers. With the holidays right around the corner, it's all about family, fun, and of course, keeping track of everything while traveling or hosting. For me, that's where Life 360's Tile Trackers are an absolute lifesaver. These little things help keep the holiday stress in check. Whether I'm tracking my keys, wallet, or even our luggage when we travel, Tile Trackers make it easy to keep tabs on everything important. Just open the Tile app to ring it when it's nearby, nearby or track down its location on the map if it's a bit farther. I had mentioned this one time I went to a poker tournament in Vegas, and I keep everything, my wallet, my tablet, and stuff like that, in this satchel backpack of mine, and I thought I lost it. I went crazy for hours until I finally realized I had left it in the car. If I had had Tile Tracker, it would have made my life a lot simpler. And here's one of the things I love about Tile. Tile syncs with Life 360, so I can see the location of my family members and all of our tiled items in one spot. So make your holidays a little less stressful and family-proof your season with Life 360's Tile Trackers. Visit tile.com and use the code Campea to get 15% off. That's tile.com. Use the code Campea. And thank you to our friends at Tile Tracker for sponsoring the John Campea Show. All right, guys, with that down, let's get to the reason we're here, which is taking your comments and questions, shall we? We're going to get things started off here with Mighty Tank. Oh, hold on a second. I got to get Mighty Tank brought up here. There we go. Mighty Tank 1, who writes, that Cosm place looks awesome. Can you see the movie industry adapting some of that tech? Seems super immersive. Okay, so for those of you who don't know what Mighty Tank 1 is talking about, let me see if I can bring this up here. Not 100% sure I can, but I'll try. There is this new place in Los Angeles, and they have one in Dallas, I believe, as well. That is called Cosm. C-O-S-M is the name of the place. And it's pretty wild. It's pretty great. And I'm going to see if I can find it here. You know what? I can't find it, but you can look it up. It's this fully immersive, crazy, huge, massive screen that you can sit in and just be completely wowed by, like absolutely wowed by. It's absolutely amazing. And it's gigantic and enormous and all that kind of stuff. Oh, I know where I can find it. Give me a second. I'm going to bring it up here on the screen for you. So this was, I'm going to bring this up here. This was us last night at this Cosm place. Now, those are my knees. Okay, those are my knees. And we were there to watch the Kansas City Chiefs Tampa Bay Buccaneer game. Look at this screen. Now, the stadium, before I start playing it, it's like a giant sports bar, but they have like stadium seating, right? Like it's a stadium kind of seating. Then they have all these great immersive rooftop bars and all that kind of stuff. But when you're actually in there and watching the game, look at this place. I'll hit play here. Those people in front of me are real, and that's us watching the game. Look at this place. Does that not look like we're actually in Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas? Look at that. I'm so amazed by that. I'm going to play it again. Give me a second. I'm going to play it again. Look at this place. Like somebody in the live chat, Gem on Lee just said, I thought he was there. Yeah, right? It looks like I'm actually there in the end zone at this place. Forget IMAX. IMAX is nothing. This place was insane. It is like the most immersive thing I had ever seen or been in. Now, what Mighty Tank is asking here is if I think we could see them doing movie stuff. Here's the problem with it to try to do movie stuff, is that the screen is so big. It's one thing watching sports and doing this. I think we are just wired to watch our movie when we can just do this. Even on the biggest screens, we do this. In Cosm, you do this. And I just don't know if that's a good way to watch a movie or not. Now, don't get me wrong. I did think about it. It's like, how cool would it be to watch like Return of the King in here? Or how cool would it be to bring in a PlayStation and play a game in here? How great would that screen be to play Mario Kart? Anyway, it would be pretty cool. So, yeah, it's amazing. But again, the screen is just so big that I think it's great for watching sports. I don't know that it would actually be pretty good for watching a movie. I just think it's too big to watch a movie. Anyway. All right. Orange Hand writes, as a self-professed tech guy, what to you is the most annoying thing about the tech industry? I hate when old ideas are rebranded as new innovation. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll tell you when that does bug me, when old technology is branded as new innovation, is Apple. I'm an iPhone guy. I have an iPhone. I'm doing this show on a Mac Studio. I have right over here, lest anybody think I'm some Apple hater, I've got my iPad over here. Here's my iPhone. Here's my iPad. I'm doing this on a Mac Studio, yada, yada. So lest you think or be tempted to accuse me of being some Apple hater, it really bugs me, this whole thing of taking old technology, pretending like it's new. Apple does it all the time. Like every time there's a new iPhone that comes out, he goes, and now with the iPhone, you can do this. Our customers love the ability to now do this. And it's a feature that Android has had for like 5 years. Like that's the thing that always gets me. By the way, Android is way better than iOS. I'm sorry to all the Apple lovers out there. I have Apple. Android, far superior to iOS. Anyway, so like it seems like every time they have a new iPhone launch, it inevitably has some exciting announcement of this great new feature when it's a feature that Android has had for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That's when it drives me crazy. What I don't mind about it, though, about old technology being treated like it's new, is when they've taken older technology and found a new way to use it. And I see that a lot, particularly like in the laptop space, like of taking technology that's been around, but now finding a really cool application for it. That can be really cool. But here's the part about technology that my biggest pet peeve about technology is planned obsolescence. Planned obsolescence. Because, when I was a little kid, like I could have a game or a system and I just would always work. As long as it didn't break, it would always work. But with technology now, they plan these things to be obsolete. And whether it's we won't support the operating system anymore, or we won't send you updates, or the battery, they literally design the batteries so that they will die in certain number of years, right? Planned, and it's not just phones, like almost every piece of technology does this now. Planned obsolescence is the thing that drives me most about technology. So anyway, there's that. All right. Anyway, good question, Orange Hand. I like that. All right. Next up, Spencer Nielsen writes, saw Juror number 2. That's the new Clint Eastwood movie yesterday. And it is so clearly a winner. Best Eastwood flick since Sully. I really like Sully. Holt, that's Nicholas Holt, is terrific. Baffled by Warner Brothers release strategy. Here's the thing about Warner Brothers release strategy on Juror number 2, because they're only giving it a very limited release. And we talked about this on the John Campea show the other day, is that, you know me, I want studios to put movies in theaters, but that doesn't mean every movie would do well in a theater. The problem with Juror number 2 is that nobody was going to go see it. And for them to put it into theaters would have meant probably $20 to $50 million of expense to distribute it, mount a national marketing campaign, all that kind of stuff. And even if they went lowball, you're talking $20 million they got to put into it, probably closer up to 50. And Warner Brothers probably looked at it and said, we don't believe that we'll even make that money back. Like, forget the production budget. If we did a nationwide rollout of Juror number 2, we don't think it'll make $20 million. We don't think we'll make back the money that it would cost us to put it in theaters and give it any kind of a marketing campaign. And the reality is, when you look at Clint Eastwood's last couple of films, they're kind of right. Even though I think Juror number 2 looks amazing and I'm hearing great things about it, the reality is I think all of us really got a sense that not many people are actually going to go see it. And so the reason they decided not to do a nationwide rollout of the film is not because they didn't think the film was good. It's because they thought, well, let's look at the track record recently. We just don't think anybody's going to go see it. And I mean, obviously you went to go see it. Yes, but it was clear that not a lot of people would. And so I unfortunately get it. I get why they didn't give it a full nationwide release. I do understand. But hey, at least they gave it a limited theatrical release, and that's more than some movies get. So I'm at least happy for that. All right. Next up, we've got Rachel Knight, who writes, in spite of everything going on in the world right now, I just want to say today I am officially 3 years sober. Congratulations to you, Rachel. I have people in my life who have struggled with sobriety, and I know that is not an easy thing to accomplish. So congratulations to you. That is awesome. Well done. And we celebrate that with you, Rachel. And thanks for sharing. That's really brave of you to share that. All right. Next up, we've got Peter B., who writes, what about The Toes? By the way, Filthy Sports, best sports guy, and Flash was a good movie. Listen, I know everybody likes to trash on it. I don't care. I did not think, you guys saw my review of Flash when it came out. I said, listen, Flash is not one of the best comic book movies ever made, like some people are saying. But I thought it was really good. Like, whatever the stupid idiot moron nonsense that why am I freezing on the name of the guy who plays Flash? I'm now free. That's how much I don't think about him anymore. Anyway, as much of all of the nonsense that guy had off camera, the movie itself was actually pretty damn good. I don't care what anybody else says. Ezra Miller. Thank you, Millie Magna. Ezra Miller. So, like, some people will point out at the end, there's some really shaky CGI. Totally agree. 100% I agree. But I still think the movie overall was pretty interesting. And so I will always believe that. All right. Thanks for that, Peter. I appreciate it, man. All right. Next up, we got Johnny Weiner, who writes, so I watched Joker 2 at night. Like you, at first I was disappointed, but when I watched the third time, I was like more and more, I don't know, I guess I love the first one and Arthur so much, I forced myself to like the movie. Listen, you should never, ever feel like you have to either A, apologize, or B, justify why you like a movie. Movies are experiential events. And experiences hit us all in different ways. And if you watch Joker Folie à Deux, and for whatever reason, you enjoyed it, you don't need to, number one, apologize for that, and you don't need to feel like you need to explain yourself. Well, I guess I forced myself. No. If you liked it, you liked it, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just like there's nothing wrong with the fact that I didn't like it. Like, I personally thought it was terrible, but that's, pardon me, sorry. Anne brought home some chocolate covered almonds and I had like a handful of them and like there's still a little bit of almond shell in my throat. Anyway, so, I didn't like it at all. It didn't work for me, but that was my experience with it. So, hey man, if you watched Joker 2 and you liked it, that's great. That's great. It doesn't mean I'm wrong for not liking it. Me not liking it doesn't mean you're wrong for liking it. I thought it was terrible. You enjoyed it. That's good. Nothing wrong with that. So don't feel like you have to explain yourself, man. You enjoyed it, and that's great. All right. Next up, we've got CR, who writes, what's your favorite laugh track sitcom? Ooh, for me, it's either Everybody Loves Raymond or Home Improvement. There's a lot of rewatch value in both of those shows. Also hilarious every time I watch. You know what? Here's the problem. I don't know which ones were laugh tracked. Because like there's always been some shows that I just thought were laugh tracked, but then as it turned out, they actually had a live studio audience when they did them. So I'm not even sure which ones were laugh tracked. I'm going to admit something to you though. I never got into Home Improvement. I don't know why. And I certainly didn't hate it or anything like that. And I always did like the running gag of the guy behind the fence. I thought that was always funny, but yeah, for whatever reason, I never got into Home Improvement, even though I like Tim Allen and all that kind of stuff. Never got into the show. Everybody Loves Raymond was pretty funny. Actually, speaking of Everybody Loves Raymond, Garrett, who's the guy who plays Raymond's brother? His name's Garrett something. The actor, guys in the live chat, if you know who I'm talking about, fire it on in there. It's Garrett something. I can't remember. But the guy who plays his big brother, right? And Everybody Loves Raymond. Anyway, Brad Garrett. Thank you, Kurt. Kurt in live chat got it first. Brad Garrett has a comedy club in the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. And it's a great comedy club. It's a wonderful, wonderful comedy club. The first time I ever went was just like a couple of years ago. Ann and I were in Vegas, and I got a text from Mark Ellis. And he was like, I guess because he saw on social media that I was in Vegas, and he was like, "Oh, you're in Vegas right now." I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, I'm performing at Brad Garrett's Comedy Club at the MGM Grand." So he left some tickets for me at the door, and I went and watched. And of course, Mark Ellis killed it. He killed it. But Brad Garrett opens the night. I guess he opens every night because I've gone back once or twice. And Brad Garrett opens once. Listen, Brad Garrett, Ray Romano is a great stand-up comedian, but Brad Garrett is savage. Brad Garrett is so good, at least in his own club. I thought that dude is absolutely hilarious. So if you're ever in Vegas and you're looking for something to do some night, get some tickets to Brad Garrett's Comedy Club. I can't remember the actual name of the club, but just search Google for Brad Garrett's Comedy Club, MGM. Get tickets, go have a good time, because he'll open up whoever the other comedians are, he'll open up the show, and he was really, really funny. He's really, really good. Anyway, all right. Sorry if that got sidetracked a little bit. All right, next up, CR writes, Faulty Towers with John Cleese is another favorite. Oh my God, Faulty Towers. I mean, that's a little bit, I think, before most of our time, but I think I was alive when they made it, but I watched it later. Like, I think I watched it in the late 80s or something, but when he did the Hitler thing and oh my God, Faulty Towers. And Faulty Towers was like a really short-lived show. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it just like one season? And it was only like 6 or 7 episodes. I can't even, I might be confusing it with another show, but I think I remember right. I would love somebody to do a remake of Faulty Towers. I would love somebody to do a really good remake of Faulty Towers. I think that if you guys haven't seen Faulty Towers, go look up John Cleese's Faulty Towers. It's really funny. It's pretty risque by today's standards, but it's pretty damn funny. All right. Next up, we got Funky Turtle, who writes, have you had a chance to see The Substance yet? A watch this past weekend, and it instantly became one of my all-time favorites. No, haven't gone to see, and I'll be honest with you, I probably won't go see it. Not because I wasn't interested. I was super interested in it. I've heard good things about it. I don't think Jonathan Voico loved it, but at any rate, I've heard that it's like Demi Moore's like maybe the best performance of her career, and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't get around to seeing it in the first week or two. And I'm like, for those of you guys who watch me for any period of time, if I don't see something like in the first week, I usually then other things start piling up, and I usually don't get around to watching it until much later. And so I have not seen The Substance yet. I've heard all about it. I read all the synopsises on it because I didn't get out to see it in the first couple of weeks. So no, I have not. But again, I've heard good things about it. Again, the one guy I know who saw it, Jonathan Voico, he didn't like it. He didn't think it was all that great. But overall, I've heard really good things, particularly about Demi Moore's performance in it. All right, let's keep going on here. Next up, we've got Lee Crow, who writes, Gio. For those of you who don't know, that's my real name. Giovanni is actually my real name. Anyway, Gio. Thanks for the oasis in the middle of this. Do you ever just watch your favorite scene from a movie? Yes, I do. Lately been watching the striking oil scene from There Will Be Blood. It rules, dude. Well, first of all, I'm going to say something that a lot of people will say. Show of hands. How many of us have literally at minimum 20 times watched on YouTube or otherwise the portals scene in Endgame, the on your left scene in Endgame? Come on. How many? I have honestly lost count of how many times I watched that scene. That scene is crazy. But, oh God, There Will Be Blood. You know, the thing I often say about There Will Be Blood, and it's okay if you disagree because it's totally subjective opinion for sure. Like Kareem Veach put up the hands up symbol in there. Yep. The real special thing about There Will Be Blood, aside from the fact that it's just a brilliant movie, it's just absolutely brilliant, is that I believe personally that Daniel Day-Lewis, who is the best there is, best there was, best there ever, he is the greatest actor of all time. He is the GOAT. No one's ever been better. No one will ever be better. But I believe There Will Be Blood is the single best performance ever in any movie. I think it's Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood. I just cannot get over how special his performance. Like, again, I think it's the single greatest male lead performance I've ever seen in any. And I remember watching the movie and I started, like, that's how powerful the impact was. I started thinking that before they even got to the, all right, drink your milkshake, even before I got to that, which to a lot of people, that's the rewatch scene, right? In There Will Be Blood, the rewatch scene for a lot of people is the milkshake scene, right? But I just, oh God, like even before that, I just think that's like the most special thing. And the whole beginning of the movie with no dialogue, it's a powerful, wonderful, 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 wonderful movie. And I want to say his name's Paul, the guy who starred opposite him, who just played Riddler. Why am I freezing on his name? I talk about him all the time. Anyway, guys in the live chat, the name of the actor who played Riddler. Anyway, he really burst on the scene for most people. He had been around before that, but he really Paul Dano, that's who it was. He burst on the scene with There Will Be Blood. Oh, and I see a bunch of people writing in Paul Dano, Millie Magna, Kane Legion. Thank you guys. It's one of the biggest shames I think ever, because Daniel Day-Lewis giving what I think is the greatest performance ever in any movie, it completely overshadowed what I think was another, not all-time great, but incredible performance. Paul Dano, I can't remember if he got nominated for an Academy Award. Something tells me he did get nominated for that movie, because he certainly should have. But nobody talks about Paul Dano in There Will Be Blood. We always talk about Daniel Day-Lewis. Again, greatest performance of all time. It's understandable. But it's kind of like how for many years, nobody talked about Joaquin Phoenix in Gladiator, because Russell Crowe won the Academy Award that year for Best Actor and all that kind of stuff. But everybody talked about that, and not a lot of people at that time talked about Joaquin Phoenix in it, because he's great. But that's what happened to Paul Dano as well. Paul Dano is a treasure, and I think, even though he's been in a couple of really good things, including that one about the Beach Boys. Anyway, I think finally playing Riddler finally got him some of the recognition he deserves from the fan base. Anyway, he's just brilliant, and he's fantastic, and I love him in that. All right. Thanks for that, Lee. Next up, we've got, it's Trey Davis who writes, Scream is my favorite horror film. How do they get away with the name dropping or other famous horror movies, characters, etc.? Like, can Marvel do DC, do it without permission? Is that what you're going to say? Well, because they don't actually use, like, you can reference, right? Like if let's say I'm making a movie, I don't know, about a bunch of, just a bunch of friends who love Star Wars. You can mention Star Wars. Like, that's fair use. Like, what I can't do is take, say, C-3PO as a character in my movie. I can't do that. I can't say, my movie's about a bunch of friends who actually go into Star Wars and we actually fight Darth Vader. You can't do that, but you can reference. You're totally allowed to do that. There's nothing against that. You can reference things, you can quote things, like all that kind of stuff. All that's totally fair use, everything. So like now, it would be different if, say, the Scream movies actually had Jason show up. Then you need to get permission. Or if you actually want Freddy to show up, like you got the newest guy who's playing Ghostface, because that's the thing. That's the one thing I don't like about the Scream movies is that there is no Ghostface. Like every movie, it's somebody, it's multiple different people. So there's no like, that's why I don't consider Screamface to be one of the great horror characters, because he's not actually a horror character. Every single movie, it's a bunch of different people putting on. Anyway, that's another discussion for another time. But if they wanted to do the next Scream movie and say Ghostface fights Freddy and Freddy pops up, that would be different. That would then you'd have to get permission. But just to talk about things that are actually in the culture and stuff like that, that's totally fair game. Totally allowed to do that. You just can't use things from those movies. And I'm oversimplifying it here, but you get the basic idea. You just can't use things from those movies in your movie in any kind of fundamental, conceivable way. Anyway. All right, guys, listen. We still have some more questions to get to. And the super chats are still open. I'll shut them off in a bit here. If you still have a question, take the next couple of minutes and fire it in, because then I'm going to be turning them off. But before we get to the next couple of questions, we're going to take a minute and thank a couple of more sponsors of the John Campea Show that we didn't get to today on the show or a little bit earlier. Our friends at Manscaped and BetterHelp. Guys, we want to take a second and thank a sponsor of today's episode, Manscaped. You know that fresh from the barbershop feeling? Now you can get it anytime with Manscaped's brand new Chairman Pro package. So let's talk about the main star here, the Chairman Pro electric foil shaver. This shaver comes with 2 skin-safe blade heads. There's the 4-blade foil for that clean, close shave, and a stubble trimmer if you're keeping a bit of that rugged look. Guys, this thing has Flex Adjust technology, so it adapts to the contours of your face and neck, giving you a smooth shave without the irritation. And yes, it's waterproof, so you can use it right in the shower, no mess. They've also included Power Shave Gel, which makes every shave glide smoothly and the face shave smoother to keep your skin calm, hydrated, and free from razor bumps. So if you're ready to upgrade your grooming game, head over to manscaped.com and use my code Campea to get 20% off plus free shipping. That's manscaped.com using the code Campea. Your face deserves this level of care. Guys, we want to take a second and thank a sponsor of today's video, BetterHelp. Guys, we all know November's all about gratitude. And along with those we appreciate, let's not forget to thank ourselves. In a world as busy as ours, just making it through each day can be an accomplishment. One important way to show yourself some appreciation is by investing in your mental health. And that's where therapy can really make a difference. Therapy isn't just for those in crisis. It's for anyone wanting to learn better coping skills, set healthy boundaries, and work towards being their best selves. You often heard me talk about that it's great that we prioritize our physical health, but it's time that we also prioritize our mental health. Let's start encouraging ourselves and others to take steps to improve our mental health as well. So if you've ever thought about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, super flexible, and fits right into your schedule. You just fill out a quick questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can even switch therapists anytime at no extra charge. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Campea today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Campea. And thank you to our friends at Manscaped and BetterHelp for sponsoring today's episode. All right, guys, with that down, let's get back over to your questions here, shall we, before we call it a night. We're going to pick things up here with Reverend Eng, who writes, I think Lady Pool in Deadpool and Wolverine is the Deadpool in Logan's world, because at the bar scene, Logan said, listen, lady, not interested. Thoughts? Nah, that was just a joke. First of all, that Lady Pool, there was only one Lady Pool in all of the Deadpools, right? Secondly, she's in the void. Logan's world was still around. So, no, it was the whole line of, listen, lady, not interested. That was clearly just a joke. It was clearly a joke and all that kind of stuff. But no, it was not a reference to Lady Pool being from Logan's world, because Logan's world was still there and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think so. By the way, I'm having some friends over this week, one of which has not seen Deadpool and Wolverine yet. One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch movies I love with people who have not seen them yet. So we got a group of friends coming over this week, and most of us have seen Deadpool and Wolverine, but one couple has not seen them yet. Actually, I think she has, but he hasn't. Anyway, because it was just too busy when it was all happening. Anyway, and I'm so excited to watch that because I don't think I've watched that movie yet with someone who hasn't seen it yet. So I'm super excited about that. Anyway, that's just that. All right. Thanks, Reverend. Appreciate that, dude. Next up, we got Peter B., who sends in a $50 super chat. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that, man. That's very, very generous of you. Thank you, dude. Anyway, what does Peter have to say? Peter is asking, optimal way to watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Well, this is a big debate. I mean, obviously, you watch them in the order. Like you watch Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, Return of the King, right? So that's the way you do it. But the actual debate that actually happens now about how do you watch the trilogy is always, do you watch the theatrical versions or do you watch the extended versions? Most people say they disagree with me on this, and that's fine. But the way to watch them, particularly the first time through, is the theatrical versions. Once you've watched the theatrical versions, you can then go and watch the extended stuff to see all the stuff that, that wasn't put into the theatrical. That's all fine and good. But I would say the way to watch them is the way Peter Jackson assembled them and presented them to the world, which is the theatrical version. So again, I'm not preaching theatrical over extended. I'm just saying for somebody's first watch, I think it's theatrical. That's what you got to see. And then you can go and watch the extended, and then you can appreciate the things you hadn't seen before. That's all well and good. And listen, there is some very, very cool stuff in the extended versions. There are. But I also kind of feel like when I watch it, even the good stuff, I feel like I understand why Peter cut that out. And I understand why that was cut out. Because the thing flowed better. And I find that the stuff in the extended versions is just really, literally good bonus material, right? It's good bonus material, but it's not the bones of the movie or the story. So for me, and when I do a rewatch, like about once a year, it actually ends up being more like once every 2 years, but about every once or every 2 years, when I do my rewatch of Lord of the Rings, I usually do the theatrical. And then I've gone through the extended ones maybe twice, but I normally just do the theatrical. But that's just me. So that's how I personally think you watch the Lord of the Rings movies. That, again, just me. That's how I would do it. All right. Let's see. Forming artist, anyway, writes, wow, John, for you to do a valuable night, to do an open mic, America, or at least half of it, needs something to cheer us up right now. Thank you. You're welcome. I have purposely don't know what's going on at this point. I will check in much, much later. I mean, the reality is we probably won't really know the results for a day or two, probably, but whatever it is, just something to get our minds off all that. All right. Let's see. We do have a couple more, and then we will call it a day. The next, we got just a few more, and then we're going to wrap it up. This next one comes to us from, I believe it's Johnny Weiner. It is Johnny Weiner. And Johnny Weiner says, also, you should watch Honest Trailers Joker 2. I have seen it. Was hilarious. They riff on poor Russell Crowe from his Les Mis. By the way, Ghostface is on Mortal Kombat 1. First of all, Honest Trailers did a great job with Joker 2. They did a very, very good job. You got to see 2 uninteresting movies for the price of 1, which was pretty funny. Anyway, they did a very, very good job with it. But I am one of the only people, and maybe it's because I'm a big Russell Crowe fan, and I am. I think Russell Crowe is just a fabulous actor. I have never minded his singing in Les Mis. He gets bagged on all the time for his singing in Les Mis. And by the way, the Javert songs In Les Mis, not easy songs to sing. Javert's songs, not easy songs to sing. And granted, he's performing opposite Hugh Jackman, who is a legit Broadway level singer. Like that, Hugh Jackman is a legit Broadway singer. So yeah, he didn't sound as good as Hugh did, but I personally thought that Russell Crowe singing Les Mis wasn't that bad. I actually thought it was okay. But anyway, that's just me. And yes, the honest trailers to Joker 2 was pretty damn funny. All right, next up. Luis writes, if Peter Jackson had directed the Hobbit movies first, would the results of the Lord of the Rings movies remain the same or be different? I mean, it's impossible to say. If Peter Jackson had directed the Hobbit movies first, would the results of Lord of the Rings movies remain the same or be different? It's impossible to say. Part of the thing that I think hurt the Hobbit movies, this is going to sound weird, but I think part of the thing that hurt the Hobbit movies was the success of Lord of the Rings. Well, what do you mean by that? What I mean by that is that because Lord of the Rings was so successful and made so much money for the studio and for Peter Jackson, that it convinced them to, number one, split The Hobbit, which is a small book. I mean, The Hobbit compared to Fellowship of the Ring is a small book. And Fellowship of the Ring was a much bigger book, and it was only one movie. They took The Hobbit and split it into two movies. I'm like, okay, all right. I mean, that's a bit of a stretch because it is a small book. But all right, two movies. But then they said, why do two movies when you can do three? And they literally took this little Hobbit book and made it into three movies, which created a really fundamental problem. Because when you read The Hobbit, it very much has a beginning, middle, and end. But when you split it into three movies, it's like the first movie just felt like the beginning. It didn't, the first movie, it's in and of itself didn't have a beginning, middle, and end. The second movie just felt like Act 2. Like Star Wars had a beginning, middle, and end. Empire had a beginning, middle, and end. Return of the Jedi had a beginning, middle, and end. Godfather had a beginning, middle, and end. Godfather 2 had a beginning, middle, and end. But the Hobbit movies, by splitting them into three, it just made each one of the individual films feel like it lacked that proper story structure. And so the success of Lord of the Rings, I contend, contributed to some of the downfall. Plus, Peter Jackson said, because remember, with all the scheduling delays to getting Hobbit, because remember, Guillermo del Toro was supposed to direct the Hobbit movies, remember? Like for years he was attached to direct the Hobbit movies, but they had all these delays and eventually del Toro had to leave the project. So then there was kind of pressure for Peter Jackson to step in. And Peter Jackson, quite frankly, I think even today still hasn't recovered from Lord of the Rings. But at that time, he said he was still kind of creatively exhausted from Lord of the Rings, but he had to step in and do The Hobbit. So it's really hard to compare those two because, again, I think the success of Lord of the Rings contributed, not the sole reason, but I think contributed to some of the struggles that The Hobbit had and that the Hobbit films had. By the way, I recently rewatched all three Hobbit movies. Not as bad as people say. I still think they're pretty good movies. They're just nowhere near the heights of what the Lord of the Rings were, but I still contend they're pretty good. Anyway, that's just me. All right, next up. I think we're Walter. Yes, Walter White Walker writes, Gunn makes fantastic soundtracks. Yes, he does. Or at least he curates fantastic soundtracks. Anyway, do you think he will stick to his to this on Soups or go mainly score driven? I think Soups is best suited with a score. I think for Superman, it'll go more score driven. Like I still think it'll have a great soundtrack, but I don't think it'll be nearly as soundtrack dependent as, say, Guardians of the Galaxy was, or say Peacemaker was, right? Where like the soundtrack like practically becomes a character in those stories. I think there will be a good soundtrack in it, but I believe, and I'm just guessing, James Gunn hasn't told me anything. I am just guessing along what you're thinking, Walter. I'm guessing that, yes, they will be more score driven. Probably a few little nods to John Williams, but also a brand new original score for Superman. And hopefully it'll be as good as, or hopefully it will be worthy, not as good as, but worthy of the legacy of the John Williams and the Hans Zimmer Superman scores. If they can do that, then they'll be in really, really good shape. All right, next up. Tarek Dingle writes, have you been able to catch any 10th anniversary re-releases this year, such as Whiplash and John Wick? Saw both on the big screen. Very happy that I did. No, I didn't. I also didn't make it a big priority. Like I've seen John Wick a lot. And while there are definitely movies that are, and for a first viewing, big screen, but after you've had the big screen experience with John Wick, it's not like Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, where I feel like it'd be really good to watch that on the big screen at least once every 3 or 4 years. I don't think John Wick has to be seen on the big screen after you've already watched it. Same thing with, say, Whiplash. I don't think that's one that you got to watch on the big screen per se. So no, I did not see any of those. Now I have gone to some of those. Like I've gone to anniversary screenings of, say, Jurassic Park, but that's one that is very best experienced on a big screen because of what it is. But no, I didn't get to see it. I didn't go to see the Whiplash one or the John Wick one. All right. But I love those movies. All right. Next up, we've got Peter B, who writes, can Spider-Boy save the MCU? Well, the last MCU movie that got made $1.33 billion. So I'm not sure there's something there to be saved. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 made over $800 million. Not sure there's something there that needs to be saved. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness made almost $1 billion. I'm not sure there's something there to be saved. Agatha just crushed it for Disney Plus. I'm not sure there's something there to be saved. So I don't think, and by the way, Peter B, thank you for $20 super chat. Thank you for supporting us on that level, man. Super appreciate that. But listen, if you've watched me for any period of time, especially the last 3 or 4 years, I have been very clear that the MCU is experiencing struggles that it just hadn't in the first few phases, right? Like, however good or bad you think Marvel is doing, we've all acknowledged that they have at least slipped a little. We can all at least agree they've slipped a bit. Maybe a lot, maybe a little, but we can all agree that they put out more mediocre stuff than they ever have before. But they're not at the place, I don't think, that they need to be saved. Right? It's not like they're at the spot where the DCEU was when they were putting out movie after movie after movie that was just flopping after flopping after flopping, where there was, granted, Black Adam made like $400 million, close to $400 million. And that's not bad, but for a movie that the people have been waiting for like 10 years and had the biggest movie star in the world, at least at that time, with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And then that movie comes out and then they advertised that Henry Cavill was going to appear in as Superman, all that kind of stuff. And for it to not even make $400 million, that was a big disappointment. Then Blue Beetle completely tanked. Flash completely tanked. Like Marvel simply is not in that place. So right now, Marvel needs to right the ship. Absolutely. But I don't think we can use terminology right now like saying it needs to be saved per se. But that's just kind of my take on it. Anyway, guys, that will do it for tonight's installment of Open Mic. Thank you so much for being here and making my little show a part of your day. Big special thank you to all of you guys who sent in the questions. Number one, because you gave us great fun things to talk about. But number two, you supported our channel as you did it, and all of us involved with the show. Thank you guys so very much for your support. Don't forget to come on back and join us for the John Campea Show tomorrow. That'll do it for me, guys. Thanks a lot for being here. And until next time, my friends, bye-bye.